We're doing a podcast.
Welcome to Relatively Weird. I'm so sorry. I'm very giggly. I don't... You know, Kim she records these. She also edits them. And I'm I'm more giggly than you are. People are going to be like, can Kim just do it by herself?
I
That would be great.
So I think the last one I edited, it was laughier.
Oh, no. Yours?
No, yours.
Oh, crap.
Not in a bad way.
The first one I did?
Yeah.
Okay. We don't know what sequence things are going to come out as, so.
No, not at all.
We're trying to not give you guys things that are horrible all in one. Well,
there's going to be a couple in a row.
Yes.
That are kind of bad. But it's all right in like an interesting way.
What's our intro?
Oh, good God.
This is Relatively Weird, the podcast where cousins talk about weird shit.
I wish you would sound less interested.
No, I'm trying to sound more like, shut up. Like, stop being like a 15-year-old girl. All right, whatever. Anyway, I'm Jilli.
Okay, no. Welcome to Relatively Weird.
Okay.
The podcast where a couple of cousins get together and talk about everything weird. I'm Kim.
I'm Jilli.
Let's get into it.
Okay.
To Jilli's story.
Good Lord. All right. This is a story you probably have heard of. Kim and I both choose topics without the other person knowing, but, you know, we've been trying to do topics that are more obscure. You don't want to do things that have been done to death. However, I did choose a topic this week that you will know, but I think it's interesting for discussion, because I think that you're a skeptic, mostly. Mm-hmm. I feel like you could, I don't know, I'll try to give you both sides of the story. Anyway, this is the story of Arnie Cheyenne Johnson. Does that make...
Not at all.
Okay. So, actually, this is the case of Arnie Cheyenne Johnson. However, to talk about him, we have to talk about David Glatzel. Does that sound familiar to you?
It does.
Okay.
Sound familiar, but in like a vague way.
Yeah. So, this is also known as the Devil Made Me Do It case.
That sounds more familiar. Yes.
So this happened at first in Danbury, Connecticut in 1980. So I'm going to tell you about the family, the Glatzels.
Okay.
So there's Dad, Carl Sr. He's kind of constantly working. He's not home a whole lot. There's Mom, Judy, who stays at home. She kind of runs the house. She just likes things done her way. And according to some of her sons, she could be a little dramatic at times.
Okay.
There's 3 brothers. So the oldest brother is Carl Jr., which every time I know, I was like, Carl's Jr. The middle brother is Alan, and the younger brother is David.
Okay. They
have, I believe, Debbie is their sister, who is the oldest. I think she's older than Carl Jr. I'm going to try not to giggle on his name too much. So the main event to kick off the story starts July 2nd, 1980. So Debbie and her, not fiance at the time, but boyfriend Arnie, plan to rent out this house in Newton, Connecticut. And her family comes over to kind of help clean up. David, the youngest, so David is 11 at this point. He is alone in a bedroom sweeping. And suddenly they see David come out and he's like, I want to go home. And they're like, okay, we still have a lot to do.
This is sounding more and more familiar.
Yes. You'll...
Yep. Okay.
Yep. Back at the house, David reveals that he was supposedly pushed onto their bed by a old man coming out of nowhere. So it wasn't just like an old man hanging out at the house. It was An old-looking man with the black eyes who kind of appeared to be demonic. He told David, beware, he wants his soul. So later that night, David says he sees like a figure outside his bedroom, which he believes is basically the demon or the entity rather, that followed him home from their house.
I just, stay where you are. Don't follow me home.
Right.
Just haunt the house.
Yeah. So Mother Judy requests their local priest to come to their house and bless the house. Maybe that will help. After the blessing, David wakes up that night at 3 a.m. screaming. The house is shaking. The lights are flickering and like different types of glasses begin to like smash. I don't know who specifically said this. I think the family just agreed that this happened. So obviously it doesn't work. She has seen Ed and Lorraine Warren, who are demonologists or self-described demonologists. Lorraine is supposedly a psychic. They deal with a lot of demonic cases throughout. Well, here in England mostly, right? I don't think it was anywhere else. There's at least one in England.
Yeah. They were involved with
the Enfield
poltergeist and
the Amityville,
yeah,
which was
I could not come up with that word. Yes.
New York, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right. So I feel like if you're listening to this podcast, mostly you know who Ed and Lorraine are. They were big in like the 70s, 80s.
Yeah.
And this is 1980. So the Warrens agree to take on this case, and they bring a physician with them to meet with the family and to kind of examine David and see like, okay, is he going through something mental or is it more than that? A doctor doesn't find anything physically wrong with David, and the Warrens sit down at their kitchen table to interview the family about what they've seen happen, what David has seen happen, and Ed records the interview. So he asks out loud that the entity knock 3 times on the table if it's there, and it does. So the kitchen also begins to shake and the lights flicker. Now, I know you're more like true crime. You're not really into the... Not that you're not, but I don't think you steer towards like the supernatural stuff. But people who know about demons, the lore is, do not invite them to do anything. You shouldn't be talking to them, even if, I think most people are like, it's just don't use a Ouija board, but it's like, don't use rods, anything that they can use to communicate with you is an invitation for them to be in your life.
Yes.
So David expresses his worry that the entity is pissed, that they're there and will seek revenge on the family once the Warrens leave. And supposedly Lorraine sees a dark mass next to David. Now she's the one that has, I guess, psychic abilities. I don't think Warren, that Ed had any specific... I think he just maybe, like, knew about this stuff. Or he claimed to, like...
Yeah, I don't think... it's never seemed like he's had...
Like, any extra abilities or anything like that.
Like he's not a medium or anything like that. He's just...
her
for doing it.
Yeah, facilitates, like, the investigation part of it. So the Warrens request that the family document everything that happens from then on around the house and with David, and that this would help them petition the Catholic Church to grant an exorcism. So it's not super easy these days to get the Catholic Church to actually sign off on an exorcism. Like, you really have to go through like hoops for them to agree to do that. I also think, especially in this time, they don't really want people to know like who performed it. They're very... I think that they know how people view this. Yeah. And also liability for stuff like this is... heavy. Like, you don't want to be legally in trouble either.
Right. If you don't help somebody seek, like, medical attention. I mean,
Right.
people have died during
Yes.
exorcism. So.
Yeah, so I think in general it's kind of frowned upon that they even talk about. Like, they're just like, let's keep it on the DL. So I wrote down some of the steps of demonic possession. There's 4 or 5, depending on who you ask, but I've mostly heard 4. I think, well, we'll get to the 5th. First one is infestation. So that's, you see, like, moving objects, you hear weird noises, you might see, like, like a black mass, or it could be like a haunting, kind of. Oppression is the next step. It's when something attacks you physically. You might experience, like, illness, depression, obviously, and then it kind of screws with your relationships with people. Obsession is the next step. The afflicted individual is basically preoccupied with everything that's happening to them with this entity. They can lose sleep, and it basically takes over their entire life. And then the 4th, and in this particular source, it's the final one, but possession, which is basically not removing, but compromising a person's free will. And they take advantage of, the entities take advantage of an individual's maybe weakened state, maybe they're sleeping less. You might exhibit, like, superhuman strength. They say if you can speak in languages that you don't normally know, that's another sign. Aversion to holy objects, and knowledge of facts or events that they wouldn't ever otherwise know. And then some of the sources I saw, I mean, like, the 5th is basically, like, death.
Oh, well.
Which,
yes.
I don't know that in any cases that we hear about, like, that happens a lot. I feel like it always ends up being that a person stops being possessed one way or the other.
That's interesting, though, right? Like, who would... Because if it does end in death...
Well, then you're in trouble. Like, something... Well, okay.
Just because I think it would be bad press for everybody involved.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I don't know. Would we hear about it? Does it happen more than we think?
I feel like anybody who would know about it would take full advantage and be like, this person...
no.
I mean, there's other... I probably will want to do another exorcism type story, which you will know, but I don't think you'll know all the details of it. But we'll save that for another time.
Great.
So, no, you know what? Like, I was thinking about, the topics we've done so far. So I feel like we'll probably release these pretty, not subsequently, what am I trying to say? Like, we'll record and we'll release as we go.
Relatively chronologically.
Yes.
Yes, yeah.
There you go. I only had like half a cup of coffee today.
That's fine. I get it.
So I wanted to do like a topic that was a little more supernatural. I don't feel like we've done those yet. Yeah.
We've not. And it's because it's hard.
It is hard. Yeah.
It's easy. There's so many stories online, but it's easy to say, like, that sounds like garbage, or...
Well, that's also why I wanted to choose... I think you know where I'm gonna go with it. Now that you're more familiar with what's happened... Well, anyway. All right, let's continue. I also wrote down... I really tried. So I think it varies from state to state, but I tried to write the steps down for requesting an exorcism, like a full exorcism. And I tried to look it up in Connecticut, because this is where it was. Of course, things might have changed between 1980 and now, but actually it was very similar. I first found one that was like, oh, Washington State, this is how you request an exorcism, and it's pretty similar to Connecticut. So you will request an appointment with your local priest, and then the priest will kind of sit down with you, get your personal history, your mental history and health. So they will also provide like an intake form for you to just basically get the process started. Next, they will refer you to like a mental health professional, which I agree
Good.
with. Right.
Yes.
I don't know, exorcisms historically have taken place for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Mental illness is now a little bit more,
Contemporary.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So they will definitely, and I also feel like they're like, look, let's just not leave ourselves open to like, we also want professionals to come in and be like, no, this person has, if they had medication, it might go away.
Yes.
So they sit down with the mental health professional, and then the mental health professional will give an assessment to what's called the deliverance team. So I suppose, I'm sure you, as the person who's being interviewed, you have to sign off because it's your HIPAA, right?
Yeah, I would think so.
And then the person will be given a time and a date for a prayer ministry session, which I don't know if this is also known as like a mini exorcism rite. Like there's a smaller, it's not a full-blown exorcism, but it's like a prayer session with your priest. I forget what it's called. No, it's like a minor exorcism rite, I think is referred to. They're also given, it literally says this, a 30-day prescription of prayer. Like, I prescribe you to pray for 30 days. It's just weird that they it's a problem. They're prescribing you 30 days of prayer.
Where do I fill this? Do I go to my local pharmacy?
Right.
Or
I don't know if my insurance will cover it. So after the 30-day prayer prescription, that's really hard to say, the deliverance priest will determine whether or not they need to seek help from the diocese, right? Is that how you say that? Archdiocese. Diocese. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know why I put diocese. Mandated exorcist. I think it goes up the chain. They determine what the need is. I don't think they like to do it. I don't think they like to do full exorcisms very often.
I just wonder what would happen, and maybe you talked about this, but I wonder what would happen if a priest was like, they didn't get the okay from the Archdiocese, and they were like, forget it, we're going to do it anyway. If it's not sanctioned.
Have you seen the new Exorcism, cheapers.
Oh,
Exorcist movie?
Yes, with the two girls. Yes.
So the priest there is like, oh no, like whoever it was that they had to petition, they were like, yeah, no, you're not given the okay, but I don't want to spoil it, but it didn't work out. But they were like, the afflicted family was like, what the hell? You can't help. Like, right. Come on. Actually, I liked how I don't want to spoil the movie, but I liked how they did it. There were, okay, just turn away for 10 seconds if you haven't seen it. But they bring in the different types of like religious, not medicine people, but I don't know what you would call them, like priests and pastors and like something has to work.
Let's just throw everything at it.
September 1980. David is now constantly taunting the family. He's speaking in weird voices. He's telling them they will die.
Rude.
Yeah. And he becomes physically violent with the family. Eventually, the family says that they witness an unseen force choking David at times. And after that, they start taking shifts to basically be with him all the time. Which had to be annoying for, like, his siblings. Like, I just want to be outside and...
Also, no thank you.
Yeah.
He tells me I'm going to die all the time. I would rather not be around him.
Carl Sr., so the dad,
yes,
thought David was just mentally ill.
Okay.
He's also... I get the impression that he's obviously not as much in the house as the other people, partly because he's the breadwinner.
Yeah. Is the family particularly religious?
So, depending on who you ask, they identified as, like, Catholic, but no one really went to, like, church and all that stuff until this started happening.
Yeah. Okay.
And I think that was mostly, like, the mother being like, we have to go to church now. So the family would finally be granted a minor exorcism Right. At St. Joseph's Church. So I think that that's more just like, come to our church and we'll pray for you. I don't really know what the difference is. I've seen a documentary about Catholic exorcisms and how it's usually not just one. Like, it's a series that you gotta go and
wear it down.
Yeah.
Basically.
So the family went with David, including his eldest sister, Debbie, and David's soon-to-be brother-in-law, Arnie. So remember, we started with Arnie.
Their house was the start.
Yes, although I believe they've moved since then.
Don't blame them.
Yes. But here's the thing. I mean, I don't think that they experienced it. I mean, it was just like supposedly it followed David home and, went forward from there. So while the priest began to pray, the room grew cold, and David began to hiss and swear, and eventually tried to attack the priests. Arnie helped to hold David back and placed a crucifix on David's forehead that, in his words, began to sizzle. David's tongue began to swell, and he lost the ability to breathe at one point. So in a panic, Arnie is, I believe, 19 at this point.
Okay.
Debbie's a little bit older than him. I don't know how old. I think she's in her 20s. So Arnie yelled to the entity to leave David alone and take him instead. Which is a terrible thing to do because you are giving it full permission. And after this, the attack stopped and David seemed like he was fine. Mm-hmm. I mean, you would think that the priest would be like, hey, no, please don't do that. That's horrible.
Everybody just keep their mouths shut unless you're a priest.
I mean, but the way that actually Arnie tells the story, because there is a Netflix documentary called The Devil on Trial. Did you see it?
I did. That's why this
okay.
was familiar. Yes. Okay.
So, and also we'll explain why it's, I mean, we already talked about The Conjuring. Did we not?
No.
Not okay. No. We will in a second. February 16th, 1981.
Okay.
We are, I don't think it said when September, yes. Okay. So we're in February now, in the next year. Arnie and Debbie have moved to another house. At this point, Debbie has gotten a job at a dog kennel run by their landlord, Alan Bono. Alan is in his 40s. I believe he's just 40. So this day, Arnie says, like, I didn't feel well, but we had plans to pick up my sisters that day and, like, have lunch with them. They were going to hang out over the weekend. So they agreed to all get lunch with Alan. And when they arrived, Alan had already been drinking. He seemed already pretty sloshed. So the group returned back to Alan's house. Now, I don't know if it was like a duplex or something. That's where the kennel was. Mm. So they returned to Alan's house, and Alan grew progressively more drunk. And Arnie recalls that he told Debbie, like, hey, I don't know how old his sisters are. I think they're, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if they're like David's age. I mean, they're obviously younger than, not obviously, they are younger than Arnie. He's like, vibes are weird. Let's get going. And then he says he does not remember anything after this point. They had turned to leave, is what he says. And then he blacks out. And when he awakens, he's in police custody. Mm. Debbie says that both men were drinking. They got into an argument, and then it began to be like physical. They were kind of shoving each other. And Arnie drew a 5-inch blade and stabbed Alan. Now, how many times kind of varies depending on what you read. Some people don't even express like how many times, but there were definitely like 4 in his chest that were like fatal.
Okay.
I saw 40. I don't know if that's true. It was a lot. I mean, I don't...
Oh, okay. Okay.
That's going to be important later.
I thought it was 4 or 40.
No. Okay. So there were definitely 4 on Alan's chest that
Gotcha.
they actually show like an autopsy type picture, that were probably the fatal wounds. Mm-hmm. If he gets stabbed in the leg, it's a little bit different. So Arnie runs off to the woods after that. The Glatzel family, back at their house, receive a frantic call from Debbie, basically telling them Arnie has stabbed Alan, and David claims that he has seen like a vision of a stab victim and then a vision of Arnie like on his way to their house. So they're like panicking. Carl Sr. and Carl Jr. drive to the scene to help Alan and basically call the police and stick around with Debbie until it happens.
Debbie, call the police.
I know. So the ambulance arrive, they take Alan to the hospital, and on their way back, they see Arnie walking down the street and call the police. The police pick him up. That's when he's like, what happened? Where am I? Arnie was not known for being violent, and he had never had like a record before now. Also, he's 19 though.
Yeah,
so
I mean, that's reasonable.
There's time. So the trial. So we're going to skip all the way to October of that year. Arnie's lawyer, Martin Minella, attempted to use the plea of not guilty by reason of demonic possession, which I believe they said it was like successfully used. I don't know if they won the case, but it was used in a case in England, I think.
That is wild.
Yeah, but they also wear like powdered wigs and stuff. Their court's a little bit different than ours. Judge Robert Callahan was like, nah, we're not going to use that. It's not scientific, and it's impossible to prove. Now, this is interesting because in court, you can't be like, well, Kim was thinking, like, I can't be like,
right.
Kim's motivation was this. I could never prove what your motivation was. So even if you were possessed by a demon, how could you ever, I mean, I don't know, unless you share thoughts with the demon. I mean, you must share thoughts with, if you're possessed, but no one knows the rules of possession.
No.
I mean, not the lay person anyway.
No, right. Like you couldn't say, it's not a real diagnosis.
No.
So you can't say this is how it behaves. This is a symptom. Right.
So yes, we can't prove how, this is every time you're possessed, this is how it goes.
Right.
Arnie's team had no choice but to switch to a self-defense plea because they were like, well, if we can't use that, we still have to use a defense, not my fault. However, the number of stab wounds was too much to be like, you were acting in self-defense. But they really, I mean, according to them, they were like, well, we didn't want to use that as a self-defense. We didn't want to use that as our defense, but you kind of forced it on us because what else were we going to go with other than I stabbed somebody? Yep, I'm guilty. So on November 24th of that year, 1981, Arnie was convicted of manslaughter and sentenced to 10 to 20 years in prison, but he ended up only serving 5 because he had good behavior. They released him.
Seems like not enough.
Well,
for 40 stab wounds.
I know, but it was like the first time he did anything like that. Now, I'm gonna say something. I actually had a lot. Kim knows how many sources I usually use. There was a lot of sources because anyone can watch the documentary, but I wanted to see like what else I could get. There's one source, and it is actually behind a paywall. So once we ever have Patreon ever, I'll be able to figure out if this is true or not.
Manifesting.
One of the things said that the source said that Alan had grabbed one of Arnie's sisters and was like not letting her go.
Okay.
So he might have gotten, like, physically, like, haha, isn't this funny? And Arnie may have gotten upset at that. Now,
Sure.
I'm just going to put in my 2 cents. I still have a little more to go, but I do want to say, if you're being possessed by a demon, it has ill intentions. Mm-hmm. And I will say, you know, a demon, I believe, would want to sow as much, like, chaos and discord as possible. It seemed like if that was the case, if somebody had grabbed one of your siblings that you loved and cared about, and it pissed you off, I mean, hopefully you're not stabbing people over it, but that seems like you're acting in defense of somebody you love, not that you have just, this is my moment. I mean, you could stab anyone at any time.
Right. The demon wouldn't have you stab a shithead.
Right.
They'd have you maybe
Like creep into someone's room and
or,
yeah.
right, somebody decent and kind, but
So that was a little sus to me. No one is to say what a demon's motivation is, but I don't think it's good, and I don't think it's protective in any way.
no.
Carl Jr. has a different take on this.
But he was not there.
He was. So he wasn't when the stabbing happened.
Okay.
But he was around for the Warrens' visits. Mm-hmm. He was, I believe, 15 at the time. He is like, the Warrens are con artists. Mm-hmm. He's also 15 at the time. So he's also like, this is stupid. Everything's stupid when you're 15.
Your brother's also getting a lot of attention.
Yes. So he said, when the Warrens asked David questions, you know, do you do this? Do you do that? Sometimes demons will make you do this. He said all of those things David did afterwards because you're cluing him in on how he should be behaving. In one instance, David's mother had told him, like, he was swearing and being, you know, belligerent and all that. And then, you know, he kept going, and Carl Sr. stepped in and slapped him. And the behavior stopped. So Carl Jr. is like, so what, the devil was just like, well, if you slap me, I'll stop doing what I'm doing.
Ow.
Right. He's like, it was just really, you know, suspect that, like, you're going to listen to my dad.
Right.
Carl drove with his dad to the scene of the stabbing. And he said, you know, it was shocking. I mean, he was a teenager at the time. You just see, basically, he stayed with Alan while the police were called. And he was like, there's nothing that there's nothing that we can do.
Yeah.
I mean, you just wait with him. I don't know if he died on the way to the hospital or if he died later on, but he did die. So Carl says that Arnie was also jealous of Alan because at one point Debbie and Alan had dated.
Oh.
Arnie said, like, no, totally not. Water under the bridge. That's not why. Well, actually, Debbie says this because Arnie's like, I don't remember what happened. Mm-hmm. Debbie's like, nope, wasn't about that. No one can say. I still have not found, like, what the argument was really about. Now, that might be because it was so shocking. Like, if you're Debbie, you're going to be like, first of all, Alan claims he doesn't remember. Arnie claims he doesn't remember. Alan is no longer here. I don't know what Arnie's sisters have said about it. And Debbie's like, she insists that the argument wasn't about her.
Okay.
I feel like that's such an important piece of information, though. Like, what was the argument about?
Well, that's the whole defense.
Yeah.
I mean, really.
But Arnie can't be like, it was about this. He does not remember, is what he says.
Well, yeah. At least he's supposed to not remember.
Yeah. So during the trial, Carl Jr. said that his parents and basically all the adults, the Warrens, the lawyers were like, here's some money. Go be away from the court that day. Because he would have poked holes in the whole thing. This is what Carl believes. In 1983, the Warrens released their book called The Devil in Connecticut. So Carl says they edited it to sound even scarier. And the parents... So everyone... Carl Sr. and Judy both signed off like, yep, that's what happened. Mm-hmm. They received $4,000, while the Warrens made over $81,000. So I think even the family was like, as a whole, not just Carl Jr., was like, that's bullshit. Like,
right. It's our whole
it's
story.
our story.
Yeah.
So when Mom Judy passed away, Carl Jr. and his wife were tasked with the responsibility of cleaning up her house and going through her items. He says that they found a journal that their mother had kept at that time. And in one entry, she wrote, quote, "The family had their medicine tonight and all was good." So upon further investigation, Carl says that, and I don't know what the evidence is, but he says they found evidence that their mother was adding Somanex in their meals, which is like a sleep agent.
Yeah.
Do they still make that? I don't know.
I don't think so.
It might be under a different brand name. He also says that Mom's plates and bowls, whatever it was always separate from the family dinner, and she would never eat, like, she'd never have a second. So I was like, oh, that's kind of weird. So, like I said, Somanex is a sleeping agent. It has the side effects of mood swings, weight gain, and hallucinations.
I don't think they make it anymore.
No, maybe not. Well, no, but you know what? Like, Ambien is crazy. Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't even know why that's legal.
I know. But at least that's prescription.
Somanex
was, I think. Yeah.
Okay. No, I mean, I don't.
I'm pretty sure you have to.
It should be if it's not. So the other siblings denied that their mother drugged the family. I don't know how anyone comes to any conclusion. I mean, other than if she's like, here's an empty container of Somanex I kept with this journal entry. So in the aftermath, Arnie was, like I said, released 5 years later, 1986, and Debbie never found anyone else. Like, she had been with him the entire time. He said, like, go live your life. I don't know what's going to happen, but she stayed with him. Arnie admits he was never exorcised from the entity himself, but that he's no longer possessed. I don't know how that works. Like I said, I'm not a, like, possession exorcist expert. I don't know if the demon's like, I've made you kill somebody, so I'm going to scoot on to someone else now.
Just gonna hop on to the next person.
I'm going to head out. So the family rarely keeps in touch with one another these days, and Debbie has since passed. Mm-hmm. In 2006, there was a reprint of The Devil in Connecticut, which, in my research, so I'm trying to use, you know, I'll be transparent. I'll use videos, I'll use articles, I'll use mostly stuff online, but if I can find a book that has to do with my topic, usually they do like a deep dive, and this came up, The Devil in Connecticut. But when I researched further about how, like, Carl Jr. especially felt about it, and actually David as well, to an extent. Mostly I do think they were bitter, like, you profited off of us. Now, obviously, Ed and Lorraine Warren have passed since then, but I believe all their stuff is, like, passed down to their son or their grandson, I think.
Must be an estate.
Yeah.
Because there was a whole thing about, I think Zach Bagans.
Oh, yeah.
Got some of the stuff, bought some of it or something. Anyway.
So, I didn't want to read it because I didn't want to use it in this, because I was like, of course, even if it's a historical event, people are going to take liberties. They're going to make it sound a certain way when it might not have been. So I'd rather take the word of the people that were literally there the whole time. Mm-hmm. So I did not read this, but they did a reprint in 2006, which prompted David and Carl Jr. to attempt to sue the Warrens, or Lorraine at least, because she was the only one alive at this time, for invasion of right of privacy, libel, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and for false info in the book. I did not see that it ever went that it ever went through. Because I was like, what's the outcome of this? And you know that their estate has probably a lot of lawyers and way more money than the average person would be able to sue them for.
So they were children at the time, and their parents signed off on the book.
Yes.
A book continues to exist long into their adulthood. So what rights do they have once they turn 18?
Because it was reprinted.
Yeah.
So they didn't have the right to sue at one point, but then they were like, it reprinted, so there was an opportunity. Yeah.
Interesting.
So Lorraine Warren and the author Gerald Brittle, they said that the family signed off on the manuscript being true before publishing. So I think that was probably, I'm not a lawyer, obviously, but I feel like, okay, if your family signed off on it, you know,
that's tricky.
Yeah. I don't know what I just feel like I don't know if it happened or if it's still ongoing, if they, I did not see an outcome for it. In 2021, The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It, was released as the third installment of the main Conjuring movies. So there's like offshoots and stuff, but
yes.
Which, you know, the Warrens are likable and
oh, they're great in the movies.
Yeah, the first Conjuring movie was creepy.
Oh, I'll watch every single one. I love them.
Yeah,
but yeah, the real life people, it's questionable. I bet. Abel doesn't like them. He would like us to stop talking about humans.
So I feel like it was interesting that, you know, and they still maintain to this day, so Arnie and, well, when Demi was alive, they still maintain that that's what happened. He was possessed, he killed someone, and now he's not possessed anymore. And I do feel like if you go, okay, you did 5 years. I mean, also, he can't be retried for it.
No, right.
But it does kind of ostracize you from everyone. Like, I mean, because that was part of Carl Jr.'s, and somewhat David's, I think, their complaints about it was like, everyone thinks we're weird. And I've lost, you know, Carl said that he had to drop out of school and that he's lost, like, business opportunities because of it.
Yeah.
And I do feel like if people think, okay, your family's so dramatic, like, all you wanted to do was be on stage. I mean, because they did do interviews, or the mom did interviews with different shows and stuff. But also, the Warren said, you know, if we make money off of this, it will help get Arnie out of jail, and maybe, like, public opinion might be like, oh my God, you poor soul. Like, Kim is rolling her eyes right now. But I knew that you would feel that way. So I did want to, I mean, it is a true crime event.
Yes. Yep.
That had a supernatural, supposedly because we do hear about other people being like, no, the devil talked to me and that was what happened. Although he really this was documented before anything happened. So it wasn't like he had a plan. Well, I don't know what he had a plan to do, but he was convicted of manslaughter and not murder, you know, first-degree murder. So, right. You know, is he playing the long game where he's like, I really want to stab the shit out of somebody, but I'm going to make this demon that David claimed was taking him over and be like, no. You know, like, I mean, that's a long, long game. I don't.
It is. My only thing with, yes, it was documented, but David's possession was documented, right? Like, we are not hearing, so they're saying, oh my God, Arnie must have been possessed. And it's like, wait a minute, what else though? Like, what did you experience leading up to that? You personally, just because you were in the minor?
Yes, minor exorcism.
And you invited it in. What happened to lead up to that is my only thing. Like, what other evidence?
He said that day, like, he didn't feel good. Which, I mean, you know what? Pick a day. I'll tell you if I don't feel good.
I know, right? Like,
but, you know, well, see, I don't know. I mean, the priests that were there did not comment on what happened when they did the minor rite. So we don't know, like, the family is saying Arnie shouted at the entity went into him. I don't know if that's, I don't know if that's really what happened. That's what they claim happened. I don't know if Carl Jr. was there during the exorcism part of it, because I think he would have been like, this didn't happen, and
True, right.
Also, the Warrens were like, Lorraine said something like he was being used by demons to kind of create skepticism about the demonic possession and stuff.
That is convenient.
Yeah.
That's convenient.
That's what
Okay, here's where I stand. Ultimately, I don't mess with things.
No.
Because I don't know. I'm not going to sit there and be like, I don't believe in demons. But,
yeah.
So I'm not challenging anything. I'm not saying I would never. I don't fuck with Ouija boards. Mm-mm. If you were like, come help us during this exorcism, I'd be like, no.
Right, yeah.
However, I also think that I do think the Warrens embellished quite a bit.
Yeah.
I think that I'm glad they weren't able to use the defense of demonic possession, because I think that is a dangerous, dangerous road to start in the justice system.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, once one person does it successfully, you can be like, well, what about that case? And
it's wild behavior. How else would you explain it?
Right.
I think that...
And let's be clear, from what I've seen, like even in the definition of possession, they don't, supposedly, the entity does not strip away all of your free will, but it impairs it quite a bit, is how they put it. So there's still, if you fight back and try to claim your body.
Yeah.
I mean, who knows? Again, I don't know all the rules of supposed entities.
Well, and that's kind of my thing, is like they make such a point of talking about the steps of possession.
Yeah.
That to me, it just seems like Arnie skipped a bunch of steps before he got to...
I mean...
This guy made me mad, so I flew off the handle and I stabbed him 40 times.
Yeah, and then it said, so we were at September when the minor exorcism happened. Mm-hmm. I don't know if there were multiple. It made it sound like there were at least 2. Okay. And then we skip all the way to February, so what is that, 5 months?
Yeah.
So I don't know. Nothing that I saw was like, and then during this time, he was outside talking to himself. Just...
Because that's the other thing.
Yeah.
The Warrens are well aware, apparently, of you offering yourself up to this demon.
Yeah.
Don't you think you would be like... Number one, as Debbie, if anything weird started happening with your fiance, you'd be like, and Lorraine,
yeah, come back.
But they would also, if they were responsible, keep in touch with you and be like, we good? Or do we need to do like a preemptive thing?
To be fair, I don't know. I mean, I know they were in touch with them about, because they were going to write a book.
Yes, of course.
Although I believe the book happened after, it happened after Arnie, or the demon made Arnie commit manslaughter. But I feel like, I don't know. I don't know. I can't, I can't say how they talk to them, but there's so many, that's the thing. There's so many things missing between, like, how was Arnie acting these past 5 months? What was the argument about? What was the argument really about? Right. You said what it wasn't about. What was it about, though?
Right. There were 3 other people in that room.
Yeah.
When it started. And... I don't know. This is very jaded of me, perhaps, but if they were already planning to write the book and then this happened, you'd be like, holy jackpot.
So there was one, I don't know how long ago you watched the Netflix documentary, but there was a detective who said that Lorraine was like, hey, you know, keep an eye on that family because, you know, weird stuff was going on. And she supposedly told him, like, I see a murder with a knife. This is what the detective said. Mm-hmm. I don't know where the detective... Also, it happened a long time ago. You know what I mean?
Oh, well, yes.
So even, I mean, you try to think of 2 years ago.
No, I mean... exact conversation?
Yeah.
No, of course not.
But I just think also, it you know, if you're going to stick by your person, it is convenient to be like, it wasn't about that. The argument wasn't about that. And then just, it was because he blacked out and he just started stabbing him. And I mean, and this is the hard part too, because these are real people. Mm-hmm. But I do appreciate that at least one person in the family, kind of David too, like he still maintains that he was possessed, but Carl Jr. is like, no, he was being fed this information. Mm-hmm. He was acting like an 11-year-old, 12-year-old boy would act. Maybe he, you know, you're in a family, you're in kind of a big family. Maybe you're not getting the attention that you want. True. And this is the only way that, you know, everyone's with you at every single moment of the day because they all have to watch you because you're violent. Like, I mean, that's kind of perfect to get if you want attention, that's the way to do it. And then outside people coming to these famous people, because even at the time they were well known, like.
And then you're like, oh, okay, we're gonna move Debbie and Arnie into their new house today. You need to come help.
Yeah.
And 11, you're like, I don't freaking help.
Well, that's what they also said. They thought like, oh, you know, he made this thing up so he didn't have to help
I saw
clean.
A man.
Yeah.
Let's get out of here.
And also the description of the entity kept changing depending on the sources that I looked at. I'm not blaming David or anything. It's just sometimes he was like a guy with burnt skin. Sometimes it was an old man. So, yeah, I think if you do see something like that, you are very like, this is what I saw. I will never forget this.
Oh, yes. I would think so.
Yeah. But either way, I do feel bad that at least, you know, whatever happened. Let's just say, for the sake of argument, David really did just want attention. That really sucks how it ended up. Yeah. Like, you know, and a certain amount of guilt, I suppose you would feel if you weren't actually possessed and you did this whole thing. And then, of course, it's not his fault that this murder happened. No, but yeah, also, Arnie, you know, he wasn't violent, but he was also 19. There's a first time for everything as well.
And 19 is kind of a prime age where mental health stuff starts to come into play.
Yeah.
Things start showing themselves that hadn't come up before. And I guess they won't necessarily talk about it, but it also just doesn't make sense to me that the demon just left.
Well, that's what I said. So they said that he was possessed by 42 demons, or 42 entities is what they said.
David or Arnie?
David.
Okay.
I don't know. I mean, I did not see anything that said the number of, I don't know if they're all just like, okay, everybody move out. Like, going to this new guy. But also, because I also wanted to know, I do have a demon dictionary that I bought. It's hardcover. I will bring it over at some point. I was like, which demon? Because I was going to be like, this is who they are, and this is 42. So I'm lesser.
They're like, oh God, can you just tell us who's in charge?
Right, it's gonna get crowded in this 11-year-old boy.
We're like, I'm not moving in anywhere with you again.
Like it's a group assignment, and you're like, great, I'm with Al. Like I don't care about him.
This guy sucks. He keeps eating my food.
It's my. It had my name on it.
So,
this is horrible.
Demons, we're not laughing at you.
No.
Leave me alone. So, I don't know. I get that there are things that feel unexplainable.
Yeah.
Right? Particularly in other cases that have been fairly well documented.
That it didn't end up in murder necessarily.
No.
Yeah.
No. And, right. the demon mostly just destroys the person that it's in.
And even for a time, like, that person might successfully be exorcised. Although I can think of...
Like 5 months. It's
yeah.
not, like... Anyway, but again, I don't know the time. And it's like... It's like we talked about. There's no...
no, it's...
Here's what to expect.
Yeah, it's very... I mean, again... You know, once things aren't behind a paywall anymore, maybe I give you more information. It will be interesting to see, like, you know, depending on how long we do this, if we could go back and be like, there's more information, or there's better information, or stuff has come up since then. So,
I know if we find out what happened, if there's a solution to the lawsuit.
Oh, yeah.
Or anything like that. It's just, you know, you watch these movies and everything's very convenient and well explained.
Yeah.
You saw a burnt man? Oh, that's because XYZ.
Right.
And obviously that's cinema and it's not like that. But
yeah, here's the other thing though. I don't know if I talked about it yet. Did I talk about it? Like, what did David do to invite this thing back with him? Was he just in the wrong place at the wrong time? Because I feel like demonic entities have to... There's something... Okay, so according to a specific priest I listen to... What do I listen to? I think it's called the Exorcism Podcast.
Oh, the Exorcist Files.
Yes.
Yeah.
He will answer questions, and one of the questions is like, am I opening myself up to demonic possession by, like, listening to this? And he said, no, like, you have to basically do things that are against the Catholic Church. Like, if you see a psychic, if you play with a Ouija board.
Oh, okay.
He also mentions Harry Potter, which, just, they're very religious people who a human being cannot take control like that. What am I trying to say? They shouldn't be using, like, magic or be involved with magical. I'm just saying, like, this is how the Catholic Church deals with this. I'm not saying I agree. I'm just saying I do feel like, you're more opening yourself up if you're actually trying to speak with these things. Like, I don't think that's a good idea. If you're using things like a Ouija board, if you're using things like a pendulum or something, you're kind of inviting it to... Because I guess the way Ouija boards work, it's not that the entity moves it, but that they move it through you.
Yeah.
So, like, subconsciously, you are moving the planchette, but they're using it through you. Like, or automatic writing, you are inviting it to...
Yeah, no.
Move through you, which, even if you're trying to communicate with somebody who's, like, an actual person you knew or someone who's deceased, just no.
Well,
no.
they say that they pretend to be that person.
Yeah.
And, again, I am one of those people that's, like, not necessarily... I don't know, maybe this is the definition of skeptical. I am open to knowledge and to, like, people's anecdotes, as long as there's not another scientific or logical explanation for it. But I also I'm not going to put myself in that position.
No, there's no harm in not using a Ouija board.
I'm perfectly content without it. But I also... So this is what I was wondering about David. I feel like when you hear about situations like that, the person from the get-go is maybe struggling mentally to begin with. Maybe they're feeling lonely, or they're being bullied at school or something like that.
Yeah.
And that opens them, it makes them more susceptible.
But that really sucks for people who just have general depression, because I'm open up to demons because I'm sad? Like...
And this is what's so tricky, because if they start behaving in particular, if somebody's got mental health issues, then they start behaving in this way, whatever the demons making them do, you're chalking it up to their mental. It is, I would say, most of the cases have got to be mental health related. But I'm not saying that there's no possibility that there's...
I think in this case, it's very hard to believe. I think, in my personal opinion, it is hard to believe in this was a real demonic entity and it really harassed this whole family. And if that's the case, holy crap, I'm so sorry for every single one of you involved.
Yes.
It is also very easy to manipulate and fake for anyone.
Oh, yes. And why a random child in Connecticut?
Right.
To what end? Like, what's the goal here? Why not somebody with some sort of power and...
Maybe, to play devil's advocate, that, children are more susceptible, like they're open, and, even people that talk about, like, children will see entities that adults won't see, and that's because they're not as close-minded as adults are, but adults have also lived longer to go, that's not a thing in my closet, that's a coat and a hat that so we also have more experience than a kid. A kid is likely to just be like, it's a ghost, and you're like, nah, I don't think it's Dave, or what is it? Not Drew. Who's the dude? It's
not Drew. Dear David?
No, the dude in the walls.
Daniel?
Yes, Daniel.
Yeah.
All right, we'll cut that out.
You got a lot of D's happening.
I know, well, that's why I said. Anyways.
We got there.
So that's the Devil Made Me Do It story. I don't know if the devil made him do it, but I don't know. Maybe I just hope that, I haven't heard of any incidences where Arnie has gotten in trouble with the law or been violent, so... And it's been this long, so I suppose it's unlikely that he will reoffend.
I will say, the devil probably didn't do it. Even if it was a demon.
Well, true.
The devil
he has too much going on.
For this shit. I'm going to kill some random landlord. The devil definitely. It wasn't Lucifer. I think it was one of his minions, if anybody.
Well, it's 42, so...
42 of them, yeah. Yeah, you think if it was the devil, he'd be like, I got this by myself.
I know, he doesn't need
you people.
He doesn't need 41 other entities to help. Anyways.
The demon dictionary sounds interesting, though.
Yeah, I'll bring it over. It's literally just a dictionary. There's so many names, and they have, some of them have pretty long passages, but yeah, I was also interested every time I watch something where they're like, it's the demon, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, oh, who is that? What is it? Valak in The Conjuring.
Was, yes.
He's like a tricksy, little... a little hobbit. No, he's like a little boy, I think.
Oh.
Or he's like, he doesn't seem as scary.
Oh. I bet the name just sounds scarier.
Yeah. I don't know. Sometimes if you read biblical descriptions of actual angels, those seem terrifying. So anyway.
Seems counterproductive, but that's...
Well, they were once angels.
I know.
Or is there minor angels? I don't know. Archangels.
Jesus.
Anyways.
Really? We don't know anything about anything.
Right. We'll get there.
Well, we're learning. I'm going to read the demon dictionary and
get back to you.
Yeah. I'll tell you all the scariest ones.
All right. What's our outro?
Thanks for listening to Relatively Weird. If you like what you hear, make sure to leave us a review and follow us on your podcast player of choice. You can also find us at Relatively Weird the Pod on Instagram. If you have any stories you'd like us to talk about, send us an email at relatively weirdthepod@gmail.com. See you next week.